Mark, as you know, we've come up to Capitol Hill today to talk about some of the pending issues here, and we're delighted to have somebody come all the way over from the Senate side to the House side to visit us. He's Republican Senator Mike Braun of Indiana. Great to see you in person.
Same here. It's refreshing. Yeah,
it's great. It's great. It's great. So first start with the debt ceiling. It's what everybody's talking about. And you have been very concerned with debt and deficits ever since you came 3.5 years ago, more or less, to the Senate. Is there any version of a debt ceiling bill to raise the debt ceiling that you would vote for? Presumably you don't want us to default.
No. First of all, where I come from, I ran my own company for 37 years, and I was kind of the CFO and CEO. It was so little for so long, and you learn all of this stuff kind of within your own DNA of how you run any type of entity. Nothing works like this place, where you've got everybody looking to it to solve their issue. And then when you get to now where we are, $28.4 trillion in debt. Think about it. Just less than 3 years ago when I get here, one of the reasons I ran, we were $18 trillion in debt. You have an outlier like COVID come along, well, we know why we're here. Complete lack of discipline and political will, because the things that drive our trillion-dollar normal deficits are largely programs that people like. Social Security, Medicare, but they're on autopilot, so we can't touch them. Now we've got a debt ceiling that this has been tampered with back in 2011, 2013, and we will get through it. Most of the times we've had divided government, so I think there was a joint responsibility, but never have we teed up at such high altitude $6.5 trillion in additional spending, 1.9 that we did in the Rescue Act, the next 4 to 4.5 trillion that looks like it's going to get pared down. That's like going for broke on top of a situation that has already taken us way beyond the deepest we were ever in debt out of World War II. And we were savers and investors then. Now we're consumers and spenders. So I will make the point that we've got to hold firm. And yes, Republicans have finally had an epiphany. And I've been clear, it's been an equal opportunity endeavor of what got us to a broken situation here in the federal government. They've got the tools to do it. I think they will end up doing it. Reconciliation is a timely, consuming process to do the debt ceiling part of it. I think Republicans are going to stay firm, though, because this is different in terms of the amount of extra spending and what you're trying to institutionalize through the federal government and policy.
Talk about an equal opportunity to actually start turning it around. I understand there hasn't been a lot of bipartisan talk about what to do about the debt ceiling. Let's assume for a moment that some responsible Democrats came to you and said, what sort of approach could we have that would start to turn this around? Because if they'd used reconciliation, just raise it, that's not going to fix the problem. It's not a step toward fixing the problem. What could they say to you? Say, what could we do? Raise the debt ceiling and, in addition, start to go down this path.
So I want to see some reforms. In addition to budget, which is going to imperil everyone in the long run if we keep doing this, I was here to try to reform health care. I think that's a broken system, and Republicans are kind of apologists for a health care industry that operates like an unregulated utility. That's the biggest policy matter here, our involvement in the discussion on climate, to where we take small government, technology, but be in the conversation. Those are the two big issues. Here's the hard part. When I ran a business, I had to earn the revenues and compete. Here, we tax the productive economy, and we spend 23% more than we're given each year. I don't think the cream of the crop ends up coming here because we've got farm system politicians that have been running the place for decades. Term limits would be the #1 thing I think that would fix it. You don't need them anywhere other than at the federal level. Let's try a balanced budget statute or amendment, because clearly the political will, the discipline to turn around a business. I was on a school board for 10 years. State legislature in a place that has a rainy day fund, believes in balanced budgets. We're doing fine back in Indiana. None of that exists here. So I'd be easy to cut to the chase on doing something if it had true reforms associated with it. And I'm glad finally Republicans have had that epiphany that we need to hold firm. But I blame both sides equally up through 2020. And when you talk about Trump borrowing $8 trillion, $4 trillion of that was where we had complete bipartisan support on CARES Act and other things to fight the outlier COVID.
So to come back for a moment to this debt ceiling, because we're going to have a vote, I guess, in the Senate perhaps this week. Larry Summers we had on. He said, look, when two people play chicken with cars, they don't plan to crash and get killed, but every once in a while it happens. What do you say to President Biden, who said for some of those people back in Indiana, small business people, farmers, that actually within the next week or two, they could start seeing their borrowing costs go up. It could hit them in the pocketbook.
So I think it's a little bit of an over-dramatization, because think about it this way. When you perform like this, and it's not like we've had just a year or two of it. We've been doing this since the Gulf Wars, you know, putting this on the credit card. This will be future generations that have to do it through a much tougher process when we're 40, 50 trillion in debt, when we're not the only reserve currency, when the real pain comes home to roost. And that would be like the biggest bankruptcy or Chapter 11 in the history of the world. That is a scenario that you can't dismiss either. I'd like to take some common sense. We had record revenues coming in pre-COVID. I think we had kind of hit the sweet spot of taxation. Even the CBO was getting ready to kind of rethink that. We need to look at what was working, take the politics out of it, because Republicans and Democrats have both been guilty of how we've gotten here. And if we're the party of fiscal conservatism, it's now time to bring them on board. And for them, where the growth business is the federal government and they love it, they ought to at least try to do it in a healthy way so it's there in the future for all the people that depend upon it.
Finally, Senator, you didn't come up through the farm system of politics.
No, I did.
You came in from the business world,
yes.
and you thought there were some things up on Capitol Hill you didn't particularly like. We were trying to reform them.
Yeah.
You've been here for three and a half years now. Do you feeling better about the place or worse about the place now that you've been inside it? Can it be fixed?
Definitely worse, and I knew what I was getting into when I got here. I just didn't think that there would be that lack of political will and discipline to maybe get back to regular order when you tee up $6.5 trillion running through committees, you know, try to have some discussion, bring stakeholders in like we did in Indiana when we increased road funding. And then we've gone from dedicated funding streams years ago for infrastructure. Now we're borrowing out of the general fund and financing it that way. So that's not the way to run the biggest business in the world, where so many people look to it. And I believe that what you do in the present, when you make tough decisions, tees up an easier midterm and long term. And I built my business that way. Nobody here thinks that way. And will we completely bust the Medicare Trust Fund, which is now going to be in 4.5 years, Social Security in 11 years, get over the cliff, and then have to do it in a way that would be hard to reconcile it? That's probably more likely to happen than where we come together, start freezing spending, and make sure we address issues like the high cost of health care, that we're not wallflowers on subject like climate. Be engaged, or else we as Republicans are going to be to blame, because we got to start articulating how that'll work. Democrats, sadly, are so kind of intoxicated with what they're trying to do with the lack of a mandate, they're going to probably be more likely to accept a rude run into the ditch down the road.
Senator, you got a lot of work left to do. Thank you for taking some time to spend with us. That's Senator Mike Braun, Republican of Indiana.